All right, Doug, we're back with questions from members of our Phyle. If you're interested in joining our private member group called Phyle, there's a description below this video. You can find out more. First one, Doug, has to do with something we've been talking about separately a lot lately, which is this AI stuff. And this is from James. He says, with the advances in AI, trying the ChatGPT was depressing at first. I was able to write 10 hours of code in under 10 seconds. I've spent a good few years learning to code, and that helps in knowing what questions to ask. ChatGPT will not build anything of significance unless you know what questions to ask it. Fortunately, I work for myself. If I was an employee, I'd be very worried. So my plan is to build as much stuff as possible, both software and physical products, and do as much as I can whilst it's still possible. This is also confirmed to me that self-sufficiency is critical. His question here, though, is my concern about all this technology is it's too much of a leap for humans to keep up with. I believe this will only accelerate the chaos as people will be less needed, and the average person who has a professional job in the city will be made redundant permanently. Doug, what are your observations on all of this?
That is a very profound question, because I am not a computer jock by any stretch of the imagination. But one way or another, I keep up with this type of thing. And I've, of course, long been a fan of Ray Kurzweil's. And Kurzweil is projecting, as we speak, that within 20 years, the singularity will happen. And a good part of the singularity is artificial intelligence. And this is very interesting, what the questioner says about would have taken him 10 hours to write code that, because he knew how to phrase the questions or whatever, 10 seconds. Well, I know when we've talked about this in the past, we remarked that this program that does these magic things that he's referring to that anybody can access, I mean, it's like we just have the baby version. I mean, what these guys actually have is much more advanced. So I don't have any doubts at all that we're entering the world of Skynet with just what Boston Robotics, which is just one of a number of companies, can do with their various robots.
Yeah,
Big Dog and the
Atlas.
Yes, exactly. And that's all advancing apace. And then you put an AI brain, possibly using quantum computing, which has been proven to work, and they're advancing on that with the help of AI, undoubtedly. So we're actually going to have genuine Terminators in the future. And the Skynet actually is going to exist. And of course, this is, from my solipsistic point of view, it simply proves that reality is imitating fiction, and anything that you can imagine to happen can happen. And on a long enough time frame, anything that you can imagine happening will happen. So it's absolutely marvelous. On the one hand, if Kurzweil is right, that's good AI, and then you got bad AI. So the question is, what do I think about it? Well, look, frankly, it doesn't matter who we are. We're all plebs. Even in circumstances like this, even Der Schwabenklaus and Bill Gates are just pawns in the game, because these things take on a life of their own.
Yep.
So it's going to be fascinating to watch.
Yeah. What do you you get to that end where and who knows if it goes positive or negative or a mix of the both, but along the way, I really wonder, as we're heading into recession and maybe something bigger economically, and you have some of these tech companies already starting to lay off people, this rolling out at that time, you just got to think of all the managerial class within these companies, the white collar people who move papers around, the knowledge workers that are been the high earners in the growth areas for the last 20 years. I wonder what happens to all of them and with tools like this as they really hit the market.
Yeah, this stuff is probably, or is it? I don't know, too advanced to set up shop in your garage and make cosmic breakthroughs with this. But maybe
Yeah.
with your own AI program, maybe you can make magic breakthroughs in like biotechnology. And of course, considering how unhappy a lot of people are going to be, it's undoubtedly going to be to come up with a virus or a bacteria that'll
Of
mutate
course.
and wipe out all the bad guys. I mean, that's absolutely in the cards, the way I see it. So you're going to have all these people that are going to be laid off. And the interesting thing about it is that in this world of Google and Facebook and Twitter and all these, all they're doing is moving digits around. And we can see how powerful that can be. But still, I've got to say, perhaps idiotically, that I'm a real world, not a digital world person. In other words, you actually need to make stuff, physical stuff with your hands, like machines and all that, and just moving digits around isn't going to do it. So what are all these people going to do?
I don't know. Maybe the chat bot can retrain them to be plumbers and electricians.
Yeah, the way this is actually going to wind up, I think, is that the government's going to give them all haptic suits that they'll put themselves in, and they'll join the meta universe, which will be much more pleasant and much more interesting than doing anything. And they'll just, visit the bathroom a couple times a day, and otherwise
They're in the pod.
imbibe fluids to keep their corpus alive. And this is going to get really, really strange.
Yeah, I do have the sense that there will be like a bifurcation of people who go in the pod and those who don't. And that there's, you know what I mean? There's going to be life will be a lot more pleasant in a pod because you can really, totally live out you really can create your own world if you're living in a pod.
Yeah, there's many variations of that theme that H.G. Wells came up with in his book. What was that book about? The Time Machine, where people had bifurcated into the Morlocks and the Eloi.
Right. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, anything and everything could happen. It's going to be fascinating to watch this. So, but I think the plan that the questioner has come up with makes a lot of sense. I mean, while we're still living in something resembling the old economy, take advantage of it to the max and gather up physical, useful things that might serve you well when things change.
Yeah, smart. Okay. Next question. What are Doug's thoughts on tax evasion? What is it like in various parts of the world outside of the West?
Well, as everybody on this call is well aware, tax evasion is a good thing. It's a necessary thing. It's a moral thing. It's something that should be promoted. It's for the same reason that when a mugger steals your wallet, your first response should be not to take out your wallet, but it would be, how can I disarm, or better yet, kill the guy? But when you're dealing with the state, this isn't practical. It's the risk reward is not there. And that's how tax evasion should be looked at. You're morally correct, but it's a risk reward calculation. Well, we're all familiar with the way the US and Canadian and Western governments work. How about third world governments, though? Actually, as bad as the US is, and the US is going to get much, much, much worse in the future because of the gigantic deficits which are being run, which they're financing through modern monetary theory and literally printing money, financing the deficit. We know how this works. But hiring 87,000 new IRS agents. But the question is about the third world. And when I was living in Europe, it was legendary. I was living in Spain. And, in the expat community, people would talk about how bad it was in France, where La Fisc would actually invade your apartment to see if you had valuable paintings on the wall and stuff like that.
Wow.
So these, that's what we were talking about in Spain, about what was going on in France. I'm sure it hasn't gotten much better in France, but third world countries. Look, the good thing about being a foreigner in a place like Thailand or pick another country is that you don't speak their language. You are not, nor will you ever become, part of the society. There's none of this melting pot nonsense. I mean, you're not a Thai or a Chinese or an Indian, and you're never going to be one. So forget about it. Even if you got lots of friends and even a mate. So you're kind of what the Chinese word is it's guilo. That's foreign ghost. You're a ghost, kind of,
Yeah.
You just kind of keep your nose clean. Bribery is big. Bribery is very big. Bribery, that's very helpful. So the answer to the question is, but look, this is an academic conversation increasingly, because if you're an American, the US government is always looking over your shoulder because you were obligated to file that tax return and pay taxes every year. Doesn't matter where you are. Doesn't matter if you never set foot back in the US again. Point number one. Point number two, Western European governments and the Canadians too have been looking at adopting the American view on this for years, and they probably will. So, and of course, with the way that foreign corporations and transfers and all this type of thing are coming down internationally, evading taxes is getting harder and harder everywhere. So where's this all going to end? That's my question. It's better in those foreign places for the reasons I've mentioned, but my question is where and how it's going to end.
Oh no. All right. Next question is about your novels, Doug. It says, in the Assassin novel, you mentioned a club. The club was a mafia for the trafficking of women and minors. It says, please tell me about the reality of this club, as well as the incarnation of the devil in Sabina Sanders. I'm looking forward to reading the fourth book. And he says, the first sentences of your novels are always epic.
Yeah. First sentences are important, of course.
They really are, yeah.
Everything. Well, let me hasten to add, I've never been to that club in question. So this is what's the word I'm looking at?
Speculation?
Speculation, yeah. Just connecting a few dots here and there, but I have absolutely nor does John Hunt have any concrete knowledge that we could take to the authorities. And if we did, be locked up as enemies of the state. So forget about that. But if you discover the existence of the actual store, do not go to the police. That would probably be a big mistake.
Yeah.
But the answer is no. It's the writer's art in practice.
And yet it's reflecting some things that seem to be happening in real life. And that's why I think that book in particular, the timing of it and all of those things like that section, so much reflect what are in the common zeitgeist. So I think that's what made the book really compelling. Yeah,
that's right. There are things going on in today's world that if you put them in a novel, nobody believe it, frankly. I mean, It's just that unbelievable. I mean, I was just thinking the other day about the war in Afghanistan. The US and other countries were there for 20 years. And then overnight, in a period of, how long was it? Was it a week or?
It's like 72 hours. I mean, it was quick.
Yeah, they just left all their shit and got on their planes and went home. I mean, okay, that's good. you got to get out of there some way or another. But it was so uncoordinated and so, I mean, it was like just one step beyond what happened, years ago when we first got involved in Afghanistan. I said, exactly what will be the equivalent of the helicopters having to kick off people trying to hang on to the runners from the top of the embassy. And well, pretty much the same thing happened.
Yep.
But who would have predicted that? I mean, that it was as bad as it was. And then they leave $85 billion worth of junk there, which is, I'm sure that the guys in Afghanistan are going to figure out, ways to deploy that, not to our benefit. 85, that's a lot of material.
It's a lot.
It's amazing. So who would have believed that? So, and there are 100 other things like that happening and things that we don't even hear about. So, I no personal knowledge of the story, but I have no doubt that something like that actually exists. These people are so degraded and they're so perverse that, just trying to amuse themselves would boil down to that probably.
Yeah, I think so. Okay. Next question. It says, I've listened to several presentations on making gold available for commercial transactions by using blockchain technology. Does Doug think this is a viable solution to make gold more accessible for the general population?
Yeah, it's a great way to transfer gold quickly and cheaply and easily. You just have to have a secure place to store the gold, I guess. And blockchain would facilitate, but the gold itself, not the digits, but the gold itself represented by the blockchain digits would have to be in a secure place. 100% reserves.
Yeah. Okay. Next question. It says, as far as looking for a benevolent place to live, is whether a country has signed up for China's Belt and Road Initiative or not a big consideration? Or does the degree of government overreach, extradition laws, level of surveillance, infrastructure, or capability of government overreach override this? He says Uruguay, for example, has a Belt and Road Initiative MOU in place, but Argentina does not. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, look, first of all, as an economic venture, I'm pretty convinced that the Belt and Road Initiative is going to turn into an economic disaster. It's just another government program, but a very big and ambitious one, but it's going to collapse just like everything that centralized socialist communist governments always do. And from the Chinese point of view, the bright side, I mean, look, it's true. Some nothing nowhere African country, Chinese come in, they build the roads, the ports, the airports, whatever it is, and it's criminally mismanaged by the locals. Okay, they can't pay off the debt. Chinese have a right to repop it. And if the locals don't like it, there's two things that the Chinese can do to get their money back. One, and this is really the most effective way to do it, is the guys that are running the country, and we're talking about Africa here in almost every case, get a visit from a Chinese diplomat, and he makes it pretty clear that, look, you either play by our rules, the contract, or we're going to replace you one way or another, and you're not going to like it. Take your choice. Well, of course, he's going to play by the rules because the Chinese can do absolutely anything they want in those countries, whether it's by bribing a local to kill the guy or if he says, no, we're an independent country. Well, that's what the Red Army is for. And at that point, they're in real trouble. So it's playing with fire from the point of view of these backward primitive countries doing the Belt and Road deal with the Chinese.
Does it concern you that Uruguay has a MOU signed with them?
No, it doesn't, because this is not a backward, primitive, corrupt country. It just wouldn't work. It just would not work in this part of the world to try to send the Red Army in for all kinds of reasons. Or no, they just couldn't do it. It's not going to be the same thing. It'll be more business-like, not as dangerous. I mean, look, if I was in the Congo, in our first novel, Speculator, a lot of it talked about how the Chinese, even when that novel was written, were taking over Africa, and they really are taking over Africa. And the next step is going to be, there's going to be hundreds of millions of Chinese, maybe, that are going to go to live in Africa for all kinds of reasons. But it's not going to happen in Uruguay. So
Yeah, no. I also noticed that like there's a bunch of big infrastructure projects that are being done in Argentina that are being done by, financed by Chinese, built by Chinese, like I know there's a big dam in the south that they're doing. And they're not part of the Belt and Road Initiative, but China's still doing those projects. So they still have the same fundamental deal, whether they're, technically signed on to the Belt and Road Initiative.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. It just doesn't seem to, to start with, this century in many ways is going to be the Chinese century, assuming the whole nature of life doesn't change because of artificial intelligence and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
But there's places where the Chinese can pull this off and places where they can't. Number one, I think realistically, because these countries in South America, like Argentina and Uruguay, are too advanced for them to get away with it, doing stuff that they can and will do in Africa. So, but there was something else that I was thinking about just now, and it's escaped my mind. Well, are the Chinese, it's going to be the Chinese century. But then again, I ask myself, well, will it be? Because are the Chinese going to manage to blow themselves up somehow? And I'd be willing to bet money that China in its present form is not going to exist in 20 or 30 years. I think it's going to break up into various provinces for all kinds of reasons. If the economic boom, which has been very real and wonderful, that's happened there in the last 40 years, peters out, and there are a lot of reasons why it could. The Chinese populace will get unhappy, we'll go back to warlords. I think nobody talks about that, but I think China's basically unstable. So you got to tie that into the
equation too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, next question. Doug, were you rebellious as a kid?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And actually, I just couldn't help myself. I was always the kid that sat in the back of the room and would make wisecrack comments under my voice to the kid sitting next to me. And and it was one thing in grade school, but it was something else when I went to high school, which was a 4-year military boarding school. And when I was a freshman, and even to some degree when I was a sophomore, they'd give you demerits for all kinds of things. You can imagine they'd give you demerits for. And, I got a bunch of demerits. And what do you do when you get a demerit? Well, it goes against your leadership score. which has to do with whether they promote you within the military hierarchy. And everybody, you know, if everybody else says in your class has little corporal stripes, well, why don't I have little corporal stripes too? So, you know, I played the game, and I didn't like going out where when you had to walk off the demerits. I remember it was 15 minutes with carrying a U.S. rifle caliber 30 M1, and you'd walk up and down the parking lot and do an about face and walk 15 minutes. And it was on your spare time, and it was boring and inconvenient. So yeah, I played the game, except towards the end of my senior year, at which point I realized it didn't matter anymore. So I almost got thrown out in the last year, which would have been, and they did throw people out. I mean, you know, like there was one guy, a couple of classes ahead of us, who, you know, did something that the management said, you're not going to our military ball, which is the senior prom. And he said, I am going to the senior prom, the military ball. And I said, you go, you're not going to graduate. By God, he went. They kicked him out. But they don't do that in schools anymore.
No, they don't.
And I avoided that fate, which would have been, well, I don't know, would have seemed like a disaster at the time with my parents and all that, but maybe it would have been a good thing. I don't know. But the answer is yeah, always.
Some things never change. Yeah.
No,
Okay.
some things never change.
All right, Doug, have you ever invested?
Leopards can't change their spots, in other words.
Exactly. Have you ever invested in a movie project as an accredited investor? And if so, did you earn the returns that were advertised?
Yes, I have. And of course, two friends of ours, one of them founded one of the major Hollywood studios, but he's never asked anybody, any of his friends, to put money into movies.
No,
because he likes to keep his friends. And another friend of ours, you know, this Hollywood accounting, above the line, below the line. If you're a small fish investor, you can count on getting fucked, quite frankly. You really can. It's a mafia. So forget about that. And another friend of mine, well, yours too. I think you know Robert, don't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. So he's a multi-billionaire and decided he wanted to get into the movie business too, like our other friend did. And he produced Crazy Rich Chinese, or
Like
Crazy
Asians.
Rich Asians. Yeah. And I think it was very successful, and he made a lot of money on it, but he didn't have to raise money from anybody else. So he made sure the accounting was done properly. But I did put some money into a third movie, another friend of mine who always wanted to be a movie producer. And he,
was this Mark Ford?
yes, it was Mark. Yeah. And so it was a disaster financially, but you know, Mark figured out that, wait a minute, I've raised all this money from my friends and I've lost all their money, not because of the above the line and below the line accounting and all that kind of stuff. It was basically because it was, you know, it was kind of a crappy movie, and you got to get the distribution, and you know, how do you sell it? So he basically paid everybody their money back.
Yeah.
Because he realized that, wait a minute, I can't take advantage of my friends like that. I got the money to do it. I mean, he was pretending it was a business. He's a very good businessman.
Yes.
But he wanted to pretend producing movies was a business. Well, it wasn't. It was a hobby for him.
Right.
So
My
personal experience has been good, but don't invest in movies. Bad idea.
Okay. All right. Let's see, Doug, how do you know when to take money off the table when you have a winning investment? He said, I have no problem knowing when to do this in my options trading, but when it comes to my longer term holdings and speculations, I have a harder time knowing when to pull the trigger and sell.
Well, you got to figure out what the macro environment is for stocks and bonds, which is hard enough to do. Right now, the macro environment is very bad. So look, everybody holds on to things because they're thinking maybe I've got the next Microsoft. Maybe I've got the next Berkshire Hathaway. And if I sell, I'm going to have, tremendous regrets. But that only very rarely happens. So you've got to monitor the company.
But what about when you have something that's on a big run? Like if you own one of these, junior mining stocks in a bull market and it's gone up 250%, and you think because the way the market's moving, there's so much potential more upside, but many people, and I've been guilty of this, will ride something all the way up and then all the way back down. And, you end up worse off than you started, but just because you screwed up, you just couldn't pull the trigger to know when to sell. How do you sell in that environment?
I think you've got to use stop losses, and stop losses are a smart idea, but they're dangerous with volatile stocks. You got stopped out and then the next doubles the next day. So there's no easy way to do it. There really isn't. It's at some point, take your money off the table, use stop losses, and try to run counter to your emotions, because it happens with everybody. Whenever you feel like buying more, you're almost certainly making a mistake, especially if everybody else feels the same way. No magic solutions. I think it's just a question of experience combined with discipline. Okay, that's the theory. It's really hard to put the theory into practice.
Yeah, I mean, the only protocol that I've ever heard you talk about before was the free ride principle. When you're up 100%, sell half, and then you're now even, and now it's a free ride, from there. So I mean, I guess that's a good strategy, but also hard to do.
Yeah, it is. But when it comes to mining stocks, I almost always never buy anything unless it's got a warrant attached. And that kind of makes it easy, because after 4 months, when it becomes free trading, I usually, not almost always, but usually sell the underlying stock and keep the warrant. So hopefully I've made some money on the underlying stock, but I got that warrant for the next 18 months or maybe 5 years or whatever it is, in case they hit a home run. That kind of solves the problem, actually.
Got it. Yeah, if you can do that. Okay. That makes sense.
You want to do financings, but especially good financings for all kinds of reasons that we could talk about, don't grow on trees. So look, none of this is easy.
Okay. Doug, I don't know if you heard about this or not, but I wonder if you had any thoughts on Trump's recent comment of potentially running on a third party. Also, there was some talk about, he was nominated to be the Speaker of the House by Matt Gaetz, I think. So anyway, just your thoughts about him, your thoughts about Trump and his role in the future, I guess.
Yeah, well, Trump, I wrote an article back in 2012 where I think I very correctly diagnosed the pros and cons of Donald Trump. And look, he's got absolutely no philosophical core whatsoever, but and he's got no understanding of economics, although he's, I guess, got a very good understanding of business. But he's not the solution. He's, at this point, I guess he hates these people in Congress and the Democratic Party so much that if he was put in a position to do so, maybe this time he'd destroy them. But he used such bad judgment in the people he surrounded himself with. I mean, they're all rats and weaklings and limp dicks. I mean, they're horrible people. He showed very bad judgment because he has no philosophical core, among other things. So he's not a solution, except, you got to like a lot of things about Trump, okay? But in fact, I like his personality because he's
funny.
So funny and so amusing. And lot of people say, oh, well, yeah, he's okay. I just don't think his personality is great. He's an egomaniac. He's fun to watch, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
But he's not a solution. Look, best case is both the Democratic Party, which is at this point beyond redemption, totally corrupt, terminally bad values. I mean, you cannot redeem it anymore. It's not like the Democratic Party of 50 years ago, where they had sloppy, weak, wishy-washy socialist ideas, but they didn't seem all that dangerous. And the Republican, now both of these parties have mutated. And I think if Trump, starts a third party, it might succeed, unlike third parties in the past, where there are people that are just really pissed off. And we're gonna see. I think we're gonna see political chaos in the future.
Okay.
I mean,
Doug,
what do you think? You have a gut feeling about how this is going to come down?
I don't think Trump will run again. I don't think he'll run again. Like, he doesn't want to lose. He's not like, he probably, his last time when he did it, when he was running, at first, he's the outsider. Most people thought it was a joke. If nothing else, it would just give him more publicity. So it'd be better for his business and his brand and, his television show. He was still doing The Apprentice. So there was only upside for him to run at first. But like now, I mean, the whole cycle he was put through was a lot of hell that was unpleasant for him, I'm sure. Why would he want to sign up for that again? Especially if he's somehow, if the heat is off of him, if they are no longer pursuing him, through lawfare of some kind, then I think he just he doesn't want to lose. He doesn't want to be seen as a loser. And the hassle, is it worth it, given everything he went through before? So I don't think he'll run. I think he'll play with it because it keeps the spotlight on him, which he likes that a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a pretty good analysis. I don't know who these people are going to come up with to run. When I was we were talking about this before the call. I'm on a Zoom call with a bunch of people that a couple of them are friends of mine, and they invited me into the Zoom call. I don't belong there. And it's, what do I want to tell you about that Zoom call that relates to, look, the average person in the US, whether we're talking about the kind of people that Mark Dice interviews on Venice Beach in Los Angeles, they don't know anything about anything, quite frankly, except their own lives and, dating apps and sports. They know a lot about that kind of stuff. But the people that I'm on the Zoom call with are rich and sophisticated, and they don't know anything about anything either. I mean, I chirp up sometimes and I make points and explain them in some detail, and it goes right over everybody's head. They're all anti-gun and pro, I'm going to sign off from that call. It's just, listening to these 25 people from big cities, I could just, it's like for an hour and a half being in the same room with those 6 stupid women that are on MSNBC.
On The View or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah.
All right.
I forgot about it.
So, Doug, next question is, I've heard a lot about FDIC insurance being a load of bullshit. The FDIC will only cover one bank account. It doesn't have the money really in it, if there's a real major failure. But what he hasn't heard about is NCUA, which is the equivalent for credit unions insurance. He said, talk to some friends about it, and they feel perfectly confident that they will be safe in an NCUA insurance on their accounts. Have you heard about these before? Is it the same situation or better than the FDIC?
Well, credit unions are very different institutions from banks, just as savings and loans used to be, which no longer exist anymore. Problem is that in a classical banking system, first of all these insurances they basically sponsor or encourage moral risk, where it doesn't matter which bank or which credit union I
Right.
put my money in, because the insurance will take care of it.
For all of
So
them. Yep.
it makes the depositors irresponsible as to where they put their money. And where do they put their money? Well, they usually put their money where they get a marginally higher interest rate. And why do they get a marginally higher interest rate? Well, maybe because the institution is taking bigger risks. So the fact that the government has instituted insurance on bank accounts is wrong and rotten from the core, number one. Number two, and I don't know about the credit union insurance, but the amount of assets in the FDIC, it's what we call the sticker principle. You know, you put a sticker there saying you're insured, don't worry about it. And they've got, what, $10 billion or something like that. And that's like not even a rounding error on the amount of obligations that they have. So it doesn't matter, because the US government is not going to let the banking system collapse. They'll just print up more money. It's the whole system is corrupt and just improperly structured from the get-go. I mean, there's no longer any distinction between demand deposits and time deposits. Absolutely, totally critical distinction, totally lost at this point. No, the banking system is a formula for disaster. It's going to fall apart.
No matter what. Doesn't matter if you're a credit union or a bank. You don't think?
No, I don't think so. Forget about the sticker principle and your insurance. Look, try to take some personal responsibility for your money and just don't count on the powers that be bailing you out. However, in the world we live in, don't keep more than, what is it, $250,000 in any bank account. And I understand, but who knows? They'll do whatever they want to do, including a bail-in or whatever. I think that's on every account.
Yeah, I think so too.
But then again, if it's serious enough, they might say, well, there's people that are gaming the system and blah, blah, blah. So we've got to level the playing field and punish them. So it's
exactly.
Yeah.
You know, the thing, I shared the video with you, so relates to the next question, about one of the meetings with some members of the FDIC, and in it they talked about, well, you know, we shouldn't really make all of this public. You know, we shouldn't advertise to people like our concerns about the banking system because we don't want to unnecessarily stoke fears. That was one clip. And the next clip was them talking about bail-ins, and that, you know, that they were a reality, and that they're certainly potentially part of the future, you know, that they could happen. And then last week, you know, there was a major crypto exchange failure from months ago called Celsius, I believe. And Celsius is going through the bankruptcy court now. And the judge ruled that it was, you know, unambiguously part of the agreement between depositors and Celsius that when the depositors' money became an asset of Celsius upon deposit. And some people were shocked by that, but essentially that's a bail-in, right? I mean, and this is the way the entire banking system is now, right? Is that when you deposit the money, it's no longer your money. Now the bank owes it back to you, but it's not your property. Like you're giving an interest-free loan essentially.
That's right. That's right. You're now an unsecured creditor of.
Exactly.
Exactly. Yeah.
So when that happens, people are going to freak out when this happens. So it's going to happen.
Yeah. No, absolutely. You can't count or rely on anything. That's why anybody that's listening to this that's smart ought to be accumulating a whole bunch of gold and silver coins, both, and put them in a safe place. That's plan A, or part of plan A. And plan B, since your biggest risk, all these problems are politically created, is to diversify politically. So don't have all your assets in one country. That's a mistake. So those two things.
Everyone should do them.
What happens to the banking system happens to it. And of course,
Okay.
it used to be that you could, with stocks, you could take possession of stock certificates. You put stock certificates in your safe deposit box. Of course, safe deposit boxes aren't safe or
No.
either, but you really can't get stock certificates anymore. It's all computerized, and
Right.
it's all a moving paper fantasy. This is just going to end so badly. I couldn't possibly be more bearish. I hope I'm dead wrong.
All right. So somebody asks about mining stocks, and we talked about this briefly before, but are you better off purchasing mining stocks on the Canadian exchange where it's listed versus the New York version, assuming it's listed on both exchanges?
Well,
if
you're talking about big mining stocks like Barrick or Newmont that are listed on both exchanges, it makes no difference. In fact, there's much more volume in New York than there is in Toronto. So you're better off in the US with companies like that. But most of these mining stocks are rated, they're Vancouver issues, and their primary trading market is almost always in Canada. And they get the stocks listed in the US over the counter, well, to get more distribution and for convenience of Americans and so forth. But when you're buying a stock, one of these little stocks, it's primarily a Vancouver stock. In the US, you're paying for the currency translation, which will always cost you money. Maybe not much, but it's going to cost because it's a Canadian dollar thing, but it's an American dollar. So somebody's going to have to do that, and you're going to have to pay them, number one. And number two, it's a separate market in the US, and somebody's got to be paid for making that bid-ask market. So if it's a Canadian mining stock and it's small, you definitely want to buy it in Canada. Oh, but wait a minute. It's impossible, practically speaking, for Americans to have a Canadian brokerage account. I mean, yeah, you can buy the Canadian stocks with a Canadian broker, but they're going to give you an American US dollar sub account. So it's really rather perverse. So I guess
if you can buy it in Canada, but if you can buy it in Canada, you want to go there. That's what you're saying.
That's the answer to the question. Okay. And same would be true of Australia, which is the other place where these things are traded.
Okay. Well, speaking of Australia, I'll skip ahead to one question. Someone asks if you have any tips for investing in uranium on the ASX.
Oh, no, I don't.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't heard you mention any. So
I don't want to indulge in stock tips.
Touts. Yeah, I know.
Touts, especially not for tiny, what they call them in Australia is penny dreadfuls, tiny little mining companies that some guy's running around with a Geiger counter looking for uranium.
Okay. I don't know if you follow REITs at all, but the question is whether or not you feel like they bottom, because some of them are really huge discounts historically right now, some of these REITs.
Well, they should be, because the question is, what's in these REITs, generally speaking? Shopping centers? I don't know about shopping centers. Office buildings? I don't know about office buildings either, frankly, with people, with the economy going into a really, really serious downturn. And a lot of those office buildings are going to wind up with see-through offices. So that's not going to treat the REIT very well. And what else do they have? Gee, I don't know. If it was a REIT for warehouse space, who the hell knows? But the real estate market itself is very problematical because it floats on a sea of borrowed money. And at this point, interest rates, I don't care what the Fed says or does, I think interest rates are going up. They've been going down for over 40 years, and now they're going to go up. If they don't go up, there will not be accumulation of capital because people will not bother saving when they're getting a couple, 3% or whatever they're getting. And inflation is running 5 or 10 or 15%. So you've got to encourage people to produce more than they consume and save the difference. And that's why interest rates are important. It has an effect on how wide masses of matter. So the real estate market, which floats on a sea of borrowed money, shouldn't, but it does. No, it's wait until there's a crisis, okay?
Right.
I mean, it looks like they're bargains right now, but I don't know, maybe they are bargains. But it's better that you, in an environment like this, wait until the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times are talking about what a disaster it is. They're not doing it right now.
No, in fact, they're kind of doing the opposite. They're talking about how they're well priced historically, is the article I saw recently. Yeah. Okay. Somebody asked about CDs, if that CDs you think are Treasury CDs, the absolute safe haven in this changing world order? What do you think?
Well, I don't know. What's a Treasury CD?
I know it's two things in one.
Treasury bills. Must be
I
Treasury bills.
I suspect.
Yeah. Well, sure. The U.S. government is not going to default on its debt for all kinds of reasons. So the answer is yes.
Okay.
So sure. If you're going to hold cash, good way to hold cash.
Okay. What's the secret for longevity and good health?
Well, look, this is just random opinion that you're getting from me. That's all it is. But I can tell you that I've been interested in this subject for most of my adult life. Like when my friends Dirk Pearson and Sandy Shaw came out with a book, which was a #1 bestseller at about the same time as my crisis investing book was also a #1 bestseller. I mean, they were on the list at the same time. It was called Life Extension, a practical scientific approach. And it was like a 700 or 800 page book, well written, but with lots of technical stuff in it. Not the type of thing that usually hits #1 status on the New York Times list, which used to mean something back in those days. So, I've been into antioxidants and all this kind of crap that Dirk and Sandy, who are old friends of mine, still are, talked about. And now it's, things like gut bacteria replacement and young blood and stem cells and one thing and another. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff like this that's coming out. And does it do any good, any of this stuff? I mean, it's way beyond just taking a vitamin C tablet every day. I mean, way beyond that. I mean, everybody takes melatonin now. Everybody takes coenzyme Q10. Everybody takes quercetin and resveratrol and all this type of thing. Does it really help? Well, yeah, I suppose it does. I mean, but look, you can't fight the second law of thermodynamics. Cannot. Everything winds down. Everything falls apart. Well, you can throw sand on the slippery slope, perhaps by doing these things. I'm all for it. But, and good diet and exercise and get enough sleep and don't stress out. Wait a minute. People have known this stuff for thousands of years and they still die. So I don't know. I mean, that's about all I know about it. What do you know about it?
I don't know anything about it. I don't know anything. I'm trying to figure out stuff as I go. But I definitely think that there's always these new fads, these new breakthroughs, that are the thing that somehow unlock everything else. And I don't know. I'm very suspicious of all that stuff because it seems like they're all like they still have the basic like materialist kind of engineering view of the body. And it's it's like, no, the answer is you just need to take metformin, everyone should have metformin and they keep their,
Oh, yeah, right.
stuff like
That's
that.
right. That too, right.
Yeah. So there's always something like that that's coming along. Every year there's a new thing that should be added to the stack of stuff that you take. And I don't know. I don't know if it makes any difference at all. I haven't noticed by taking any supplement that it makes any difference in the way that I feel at all. I mean, maybe it does over time, but I don't know.
Yeah, that's the way I feel about it. I mean, I've been taking all this crap for many years and I don't think it hurts, but I'm not entirely sure it helps.
Yeah, it would have been interesting if you could have like separated, had a clone at the time just as a controlled experiment and then opt into whichever body was better after 10 years.
Well, and of course, another possibility is, when you're about to kick the bucket, have your body, or at least your head with your brain frozen so that it comes out the other end. I mean, this is, look, almost anything's worth a shot, I suppose, but
yeah, maybe. I don't know.
maybe.
I don't think death's so bad. I think people are overly afraid of death now, and it almost causes the culture to be irrational because people are afraid of death. So they do all kinds of things like they go along to get along more, stand for nothing, try and avoid pain and gain pleasure. It's like it all goes down. I think it all is a slippery slope.
Yeah. And look, so, all right, you live another 20 years or another 40 years and you're still, well, look, I've said, if it's possible, somehow magic happens and I can trade my current body in for, I always say, Bruce Jenner's body just before he won the decathlon. That would, yeah, okay, I'll take that. But, I don't even like the way the world is going at this point. So,
yeah, I think we're made for the time we're born into. And then if you tried to overextend that, it'd be a big mishmash anyway. It wouldn't work right.
probably not. It's like, supposing you were a successful Tyrannosaurus Rex that managed to
Hang out.
It doesn't matter. You're still alive, but you don't belong in today's world.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. Like, because think about the adoption of technology we were talking about before we started recording, that, you said, well, you said you're a dinosaur about, we're talking about using the ChatGPT thing. You said, I don't want to do that. It's just too much for me to take on. I'd rather just remain the dinosaur. And I think, but if you can't do that, if you're going to extend lifetimes dramatically, I mean, you have to, or else you end up being totally like an outcast of society anyway.
Yeah, you wind up cluttering your mind up with all kinds of stuff that after a while you just vaguely remember. Yeah. So I don't know. It's, God, we're getting back to a very dismal view of reality.
Okay, so let me ask you one more question that it didn't make it on the list because it came in a little later. We did our video on the 8 parasitic trends. And the question was, I turned
them into 9 though, actually.
Okay, there's 9. So the question was, we can talk about the one you added, but the question was, are there any positive trends that are happening at the same time? Are there any positive trends that you see? So first tell me the 9th one you came up with to add to the list.
Barbarian migrations. It's like, mass migration of people, generally those of us in the West, we like America the way it is. Europeans like the culture and all this type of thing. But when you get millions or tens of millions of people from alien cultures that just overwhelm where you are, and they expect to be fed and housed and clothed and, have walking around money, and they do. And if they can't, I don't know, maybe they'll all go to work and they'll be fine. But mass migrations are going to change our current culture. Well, cultures have been changing for thousands of years, and they'll keep changing. But, these things are turbulent and they're unpleasant while they happen. So that's the ninth biggest thing. And when I was on a different Zoom call than the one I was mentioning, these are with ANCAPs, which you know this one. One of our participants, Giant Bandari, he's the one that mentioned migration as being more important than any of the other 8 factors. He's an Indian, and he's an Indian that's learned to hate India, basically other Indians. And listening to him go into a soliloquy about why that's the case
He's ruthless.
it's really fun. But says no, it's going to change everything when these people, and they will migrate.
They
Because
are.
if I was a young Nigerian or a young Guatemalan, I'm getting the hell out of there at any cost.
Yep.
That's what's going to happen.
Okay. So are there any counter trends, any positive trends that you see happening?
That is really worth thinking about. And well, look, the 2 trends that I've always put my finger on is, number one, the advance of technology, which has been going on basically an exponentially accelerating rate for the last, what, you want to say 40,000 years with the invention of the bow, or you want to say 2 million years from the conquest of fire, or maybe we just want to start with people moving into cities 5,000 years, slowly but exponentially. And now, since the Industrial Revolution, it's gone, we passed what they call the knee on the curve, and it's going vertical. Okay, so that's positive. And the second thing is the average person can't overemphasize this enough, even though we've got, is that swine, Noble Harari, what's his name?
Yeah, Harari.
Most of the people in the world are useless mouths. Well, that happens to be true, but it's none of my business. If we didn't have government and welfare systems the way they are, they wouldn't be useless mouths, and there wouldn't be so many of them. I don't want to go into that whole thing. But okay, technology is one thing, and the fact the average person, even though most of them are useless mouths, is wired to produce more than he consumes and save the difference because winter's coming. We're like squirrels. So those are 2 trends, which you can corrupt them, you can change them, but they're still in existence.
Yeah, I think those are good. It does seem to me there's something like it.
Well, we like something
Something
more
big.
here and now.
Yeah,
right.
We'll have to think about
less
these.
big picture. Yeah,
Yeah,
because all these other 9 trends are like here and now dangers. So what's a here and now good thing?
I think I need to think about it. We'll put some thought into it. We'll come back and maybe tackle that in an episode on its own. What do you think?
Yeah, we should. I mean, one thing I think about is, well, maybe since the U.S. military has basically mutated from, spit and polish and uniforms and marching around on drill fields to everybody wants to be a special operations guy.
Yeah.
Or a CIA guy or something like that. And these guys are all out of control. I mean, I think they're all satrapies within the giant bureaucracy.
Mm-hmm.
And they're all out of control. But, maybe some will be good out of control.
Exactly.
That's possible.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's put some more thought into it, and we come back and maybe do an episode on this, a positive episode, positive
This
trends.
would take some real thinking, some good,
Yeah.
good here and now trends, right?
Yeah. We'll come up with some. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, Doug, we'll leave it there for today. We'll be back next week. So thanks very much.
Okay. Thanks, Matt.